programs that we have not yet seen the true impact due to poor monitoring frameworks. Mr. Speaker, we have been prioritizing social intervention programs in Jamaica for a number of years. In fact, we have not seen the benefits and the return on investments. Between 2007 and 2018, Jamaica spent over $387 billion on social intervention programs that targeted crime and violence as well as at-risk youth. And this does not include non-governmental interventions. Additionally, between 2022 and 2023, the Ministry of Labour and Social Security spent $44.4 million on a single intervention program. What is the quality of the impact? We do not know. Mr. Speaker, Jamaica is no safer today as a result of existing social intervention programs. In fact, regardless of where we live, we are not able to sleep with our windows and doors open. As our report indicated in April of this year, approximately 70% of homicides in Jamaica are related to gang violence in unregulated communities. Capri data also suggests that the data also revealed that 20% of interpersonal murders attributed directly and indirectly to gang violence. In 2017, Mr. Speaker, sociologist Peter Espew argued that the first step change in any community is to make the residents feel good about themselves and their community. And he believes that the broken windows theory of social change is fitting. In fact, it is time for us to stop addressing the symptoms. We need to address the root of the problem. Generally, Mr. Speaker, informal settlements pose several challenges. Primary among them is that they serve as an incubator and a safe haven for criminals and criminal activities. Are we not tired of hearing that gunmen escaped in nearby bushes? Are we comfortable with the fact that law enforcers find it difficult to navigate narrow lanes, dirt tracks? In other words, Mr. Speaker, we cannot effectively fight crime in poorly developed and unregularized areas. The flanker community is a prime example, local example of how land regularization through community upgrading has led to the decrease in murder rates. How can the government adequately provide for these members in the given communities through poor infrastructure on unregularized lands? Mr. Speaker, we're proposing a 5-year holistic land regularization program that will target communities across the island. As a government, we have to prioritize and invest in land regularization by creating first the atmosphere of order and lawfulness. Mr. Speaker, we have clearly examined lessons not accepted at this time, lessons from our regional neighbors, and so our framework for this will facilitate the legislation of tenure of titling undertaken by Peru, for example, but critical to our framework are measures implemented by Brazil and Colombia by upgrading public services, job creation and opportunity, community support, and importantly, community participation. Mr. Speaker, under its land regularization program, Colombia has seen significant gains which we are hoping to achieve. Improved quality of life for example, by a 13-point index, significant increases in in land property value, and decreases in homicide rates from 58 to 37 murders per capita in 2004 and 2007. So for us, Mr. Speaker, these are some benefits that we want to gain, not accepted at this time. These are some benefits that we hope to gain. Firstly, the program will enable effective crime-fighting efforts. The removal of zinc fences will improve security. We will strategically implement Jamaica Eye for remote security measures and improve community policing by dismantling the safe havens of criminals. Secondly, land regularization will provide greater land security while decreasing land fraud, as legitimate land ownership will make it easier to buy and sell property while serving several economic benefits such as collateral, investment, access to formal credit, and land values. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the program will facilitate proper infrastructure development. It is an indictment on us to have communities accessible to emergency service vehicles such as fire trucks. Land regularization sets a premise on which developers, including the government, will implement proper amenities and determine the most appropriate locations for health facilities, recreational spaces, markets, and so on. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, the program will allow the government to implement and encourage environmentally friendly practices and policies such as communal water harvesting, permaculture, recycling hubs, and even green spaces. Mr. Speaker, climate change is real. As I close, Mr. Speaker, this 3 to 5 year period will be used for land regularization serves as a perfect opportunity for us to do proper research on the interventions, the social interventions implemented, because what we have seen is that we have not properly examined the weaknesses and the benefits of the social intervention program. programs. This is the ideal opportunity for us to prioritize land regularization and to study in a longitudinal way the social interventions that have been implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, first proposition speaker, for your contribution. Let's take the case from the first opposition speaker, defending social interventions.
Adjudicators, members of the audience, good morning. Worthy opponents, you mentioned that social interventions fail despite the great investments made. But wouldn't you consider that a part of the things, or one of the things that erode the effectiveness of those programs would be things such as corruption, political corruption, so that it erodes and actually not cause the targeted persons to actually get what they actually deserve? Treating symptoms are not the root of the culture, not the root of the issue. We will show you that the issue of gang violence and crime in Jamaica is so deep-rooted that social intervention is the only tool that is equipped to actually address those needs, to first have a long-term and a short-term impact on gang violence. I will continue. We believe the government's policy to prioritize land regularization would be a grave misstep, and unless we change the cultural mindset of the people, the wounds will continue to fester, and we cannot effectively combat gang violence. Prioritizing social intervention is a better strategy to combat gang violence since it adequately addresses the real underlying issues. What can we do, you say? Only to make the right step through social transformation and empowerment programs. Gang violence is a perennial issue that plagues Jamaica, and we need social interventions tackling education, employment, and community development, like those or those from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, have proven highly effective in curbing gang violence. Therefore, this must be the first priority before anything else, such as land regularization, to combat gang violence. Our second speaker will expound on our arguments and show why social intervention must be prioritized over
point of information.
Not at this time, in the here and now. And lastly, you will hear from our third speaker, who will water the tree so that you can see the fruits of the labor of social interventions. Mr. Speaker, a tree is only as strong as its roots. The origin of gangs and gang violence varies across communities. Therefore, social intervention as a multifaceted approach is a much more suitable platform for making a sustained impact on gang violence. Simmons 2004 states that Kingston's communities formed from the marginalization of poor peasants and lowly freed slaves in the pre-independence era. Oscar Lewis' culture of poverty theory posits that these communities have a poor subculture, with participants having different beliefs and actions than that of mainstream society, like violent behavior passed on from
point
one
of
generation
information.
to the next. Not yet, my opponents. This is a good part. A culture of poverty and no an informal for dead culture. Post-1962 politicians provided structure to communities through social housing projects, but also to solidify political control, thus creating the first garrisons. We must conclude, therefore, that the factors driving gang violence are the cultural tendencies, marginalization, poverty, politics, socioeconomic conditions, and more, and not just an issue of irregular land tenure arrangements.
Point of information.
I'll take your point.
All right, so within our Jamaican context, we have seen that gun and fuel to what we have been inherited or what we have inherited. There has been no social intervention program that is deep in the political issues that have fueled gang violence in Jamaica.
Thank you, my opponent. That is so wrong. And I'll show you one example. There's Tivoli, and there are several others I don't even want to mention, but I'll tell you my point right now. Furthermore, land tenure arrangements were formalized in several territories, and this failed to reduce gang violence. This finding is supported by the 2024 Capri report on reorienting Jamaica's resources for sustained violence reduction. It highlights that several formal communities regressed into squatter settlements as former residents abandoned their homes to escape the growing disorder. Such communities include Tivoli Gardens, Trenchtown, Tass, Penin, Spanish Town, Newlands, and Portmore. Norwood in Montego Bay, St. James is another
point of information.
Just a moment, rife with gang violence without the same irregular land tenure arrangements as confirmed by another study. In examining the original causes of gangs and gang violence, we see that social intervention tailored to the community's
point of information.
Not at this time, must be the first approach to have a sustained impact. The opportunity social intervention provides to address the underlying issues within these communities cannot be achieved through land regularization.
Point of information.
Our second speaker will further these points. Please stop bothering me, my opponents. My second point is that the risks and limitations associated with land regularization makes it an ineffective policy strategy to combat gang violence. The policy fails to take fully into account the physical, the legal, and the social implications it will have in these communities. And so we must consider, one, the cost efficiency of the proposed policy. Mr. Speaker, other than the yearly budgetary allocation, Jamaica receives tremendous support with the cost and implementation of social intervention programs from non-governmental groups such as USAID, Rise Life Jamaica, among others. Under our step, we will be mandating oversight and evaluation boards for all social intervention programs to address any existing issues such as corruption and misappropriation of funds. My opponents, please note that these programs under social interventions will assist to provide the same structural and design changes to communities that land regularization may provide. It's a win-win situation. Nonetheless, land regularization changes to community structure and design does not address the mindset of the people. We acknowledge that. And the issue of distrust between the police and citizens, which is what social intervention is purposed to do. It shows, therefore, that land regularization is like a branch of the social intervention tree after social intervention takes root in these communities. Secondly,
point of information.
Not at this time, my opponents. Having a formal title does not automatically transform into the financial freedom and upward mobility into society as the opponents are painting it. Mr. Speaker, a negative stigma is attached to these communities. There's a high risk, for one, that financial institutions may refuse properties as collateral because of them being a liability risk. But two, while some residents may manage to improve properties, who will buy? Would you? The Capri report acknowledged that even without active conflict, threat of gang violence is a constant concern due to past conflicts and the proximity of rival gangs. To ensure community development, Mr. Speaker, greater effort is needed now and for the long term to translate the culture and stigma attached to these communities to the ongoing social intervention programs. Mr. Speaker, only social intervention programs are equipped to meet the varied social needs of the residents, which are the underlying issues causing gangs to have a hold on these communities. I have shown you how prioritizing land regularization is an unsustainable policy strategy to meet the needs of the residents and will not have the intended effect of reducing gang violence. Remember, a tree is only as strong as its roots. Thank you.
Thank you, first opposition speaker. Let's take the contribution from the second proposition speaker.
Please tell me when to begin. I begin. Honorable adjudicators, fellow men, the opposition minister has shared with us political corruption as a major deterrent to social interventions working. And this has been the case for almost 2 decades. Our question is, how can you be sure that political corruption will end this time around with your interventions? Secondly, as you spoke about how communities have regressed, we ask the question, did you really listen to our definition of land regularization, which would have mitigated against the things you cited? The Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, has addressed the social, economic, and environmental benefits of land regularization in reducing the severe impact of gang violence on certain communities. Mr. Speaker, I will now examine its psychosocial impacts. The positive psychosocial impacts of land regularization on gang-oppressed communities are well documented in the literature. Researchers cite a fostering of security and permanence, heightened agency, and community cohesion, thus minimizing legitimizing the manipulation and control of gang activities. This sense of unity and connection is a powerful force against gang violence, control, and manipulation, according to Lincoln Institute of Land Policy 2018. Mr. Speaker, one major problem why unregularized communities often passively endure or facilitate gang violence is that these communities have little or no trust in the governance systems of the country. The paradox is that many support political activism and terrorism, but still feel marginalized and alienated from the rest of the society. The segment of society honorable adjudicators perceived to be more respected and given more opportunities. This is why these disenfranchised communities always want justice. The National Library of Medicine 2018 and 2021 notes that the polarization between the different social strata breeds limited trust, psychological stress, and higher crime rates. Gangs sometimes give the citizens of these communities the justice they crave by protecting them from external adversarial factors, providing earning opportunities, albeit through the wrong means, and fostering belongingness to a perceived powerful group. However, Mr. Speaker, these same gangs are the double-edged swords that will feed these said citizens and communities and bite them sooner or later. Land regularization, Mr. Speaker, removes the massive social divide and replaces it with meaningful inclusion, respectable living, more opportunities for growth and development, and public safety. This powerful land regularization tool unlocks possibilities where previously there was normalized hopelessness and resignation in these former victims of crime and violence, according to United Nations 2023. When people trust the government, Mr. Speaker, what Capri 2021 terms state legitimacy, they are more likely to buy into the social initiatives that are now no longer, not at this time, seen as superficial political short-term gimmicks, but rather as sustainable opportunities that will help them maintain their upgraded lifestyles and enhance circumstances. Not at this time. Because, Mr. Speaker, the more they trust the system, the less they will trust their gangster counterparts. And they will now need to protect the smuggliness, a civic term, that they have acquired, which is their new image, their dignity, the social services they now have, the legally accessed services. And they no longer need to hide the shame of no fixed addresses, living in an under-resourced communities, borrowing people's addresses. And they will be motivated to remove the smear of, keep the smear of crime, stigmatization, and discrimination away from their communities as they unleash their resilience and creativity. Our opponents may argue that many costs will arise in a moment from land regularization because of a slew of new costs. And we acknowledge this. And this is why in our change model, we are proposing for prioritization of these social initiatives only after the land regularization, Mr. Speaker. And this is supported by the United Nations Human Settlements of 2003. There are several social initiatives now that cannot work because we have put the cart before the horse. We have flushed billions down the toilet, 387 billion. Only after citizens become hopeful and empowered and ambitious in their regenerated environments will the impact of your social programs be amplified to help these communities not to be conduits to criminal gangs, Mr. Speaker. This is supported by Capri 2024. And in Peru, we found that they had a project that they said the land regularization as a first tier needed to be followed by these targeted social interventions. And I quote from a Rosetown resident who says, and I quote, who was from a formerly unregularized community in Kingston. Because if you know you have to pay certain bills and you inquire the land and you want to develop and so on, it gives you the drive. Capri 2024. Mr. Speaker, although this kind of regularization is not at the level that we want, but this is the drive that we want, that land regularization can give. And even if it does not deliver the reduction in gang violence, then the individual, national, and community gains will be many.
Thank you, Speaker. Time. Thank you. The debate is getting a bit hot now. We're picking up. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take the contribution. Order. Thank you. We'll take the contribution from the second opposition speaker.
Adjudicators, members of the proposition, and our audience, good morning. My first speaker would have given you an overview of gang violence and the limitations of land regularization as a policy strategy. It is now my job to focus your minds on the proven successful social interventions that combat gang violence within severely impacted communities. I will now go into my substantives. Social intervention aids in national security, Mr. Speaker. And an example of this is with the Zone of Special Operations, ZOSO. ZOSO is a multifaceted and wide-reaching social intervention that deals with crime reduction, in particular gang violence, re-socialization, and infrastructural development. Therefore, we see some aspects of land regularization subsumed under social intervention. Hence, social interventions must be a priority.
Point of info.
Not accepted at this time. But my opponents, let's take the first step by addressing crime reduction. ZOSO was first introduced in September 2017 in Mount Salem, which recorded 54 murders attributed to the 12 gangs in operation. However, between 2017 and 2023, Mount Salem had less than 10 murders and absolutely no murders in 2024 so far. How? Well, collaborations between the police and citizens increased, therefore putting a dent in gang violence. Notably,
point of information.
At this time, notably, land regularization cannot achieve these immediate changes. Through social interventions geared to re-socialization, we foster trust between the citizens and the police to combat gang violence. This is the key in crime fighting. The results of social intervention collaborations are evident, my opponents. And if you doubt me, let's examine the recently concluded 2023 Klansman gang trial. Interestingly, the prosecutor's star witnesses were ex-gang members who were able to gain the trust of the state and testify against the members of the Klansman gang. Yet another step, wouldn't you agree? And we accept that, not accepted at this time, we accept that there has not been a complete erasure of gang violence, but ZOSO and collaborations show progress. Land regularization does not address the issues of trust and re-socialization as social interventions do. And this is a fundamental reason why it cannot be a priority at this time. Now, in taking the second step, Mr. Speaker, we must note that social intervention programs provide a well-being for citizens. Now, this is seen in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security's empowerment programs. They have the employment program and the education and entrepreneurship program. And these programs are geared towards productive employment, further education.
Point of information.
Accepted at this time for youth between the ages of 18 and 35. Now, interestingly, these were specifically tailored to address adults 18 years and over because they are the ones that make up the gangs. Now, essentially, these programs can reduce the number of gang members by introducing the youth to better opportunities and equipping them with marketable skills for long-term employment. Now, this is a stark difference, Mr. Speaker. Seaview Gardens, for example, which were a part of a land regularization program. Now, unfortunately, the citizens within those communities still face issues of unemployment and inadequate access to education. Now, why? Because land regularization does not help to shoulder the citizens' immediate needs. Now, my opponents, I am very glad that you had mentioned the Rose Garden community. Now, in Rosetown community, in our final step, we will. Right, so in our final step is to understand that social intervention fosters rehabilitation for both parents and children. Now let's examine Project STAR, a PSOJ initiative which was used in the Rosetown and Parade Gardens communities, two notoriously violent and gang-infested communities. But you know what the people said? They said that they are happy for the social interventions because it has reduced crime in their communities, not because of land regularization. Let's get it correct. Project STAR addresses additional routes for gang violence, which are poor parenting, and that our youth are not equipped with the tools to manage violent behavior. To tackle this, Project STAR does what land regularization cannot. It shows parents their roles as good parents, positive role models, and friends, and allows for counseling sessions which help to reduce the battles at home and to decrease the risk of those being involved in violent activities. And it also helps to keep our youth active. Mr. Adjudicator, the members of those communities have seen long and short-term progress as a result of social intervention. Therefore, we must prioritize this, and prioritizing anything else would be a grave injustice to the citizens. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, social interventions are essential to change the factors that foster gang violence ongoing existence. Social results, short-term and long-term, and therefore removing any perceived benefits that the proposition believes we should prioritize land regularization. And in conclusion, final point, let us remember that a tree is only as strong as its roots, and let us not prioritize the branch. The opposition pauses.
Thank you, second opposition speaker. The debate will now transition to the period of questioning, and we will begin with the opposition team. That's the team from the Administrator General's Department, asking questions of the proposition team from the Ministry of Education and Youth. I'll tell you when to begin. One moment.
You start.
Yes, you may begin.
My opponents, would you agree that social intervention provided more community-tailored initiatives that targets the root issues of gang violence?
Definitely not. Because we have seen that what you're talking about, has not materialized at the community level. Fragmented benefits across individual communities, with a few individuals within those communities.
Additionally, in those communities, individuals, particularly males under the age of 35, are primarily those who are incarcerated, and they have benefited from social intervention programs, which means that they have not been working properly.
Time. My opponent, we have provided data that contradicts the very premise of your argument. But the second speaker came up here and chanted to us about pride and dignity. My opponent questioned the mother that gets the title and the son that is embedded in crime and violence. He will also have an address, but will that prevent him from being a part of criminality?
Certainly, because he will want to protect his mom's property. So we don't understand family ties and community ties.
My opponent, it doesn't seem that you know how a garrison run, but I'll forgive you for that. Since land regularization allows for better infrastructure and living conditions and social intervention, wouldn't you? I asked the wrong question.
I didn't hear the question.
Again?
There is no question. Right, I would ask, can we say you have been superficializing people's legal rights to respectable, safe living, by implementing social interventions that do not work well for gang-oppressed communities? And how do you justify this indignity and violation of human rights?
My opponent had no time.
Additionally, I think we're still in our time. Additionally, ZOSOs have not been working because they infringe upon the fundamental rights of individuals, and we cannot determine when ZOSOs will end, which means that we're perpetually engaging in what we deem as a social intervention that has not been fixing the real issues that we're facing here in Jamaica. And we do determine that land regularization, fixing these communities, addressing the small lanes, the dirt tracks, and all of these issues where police have to be running through zinc fences, we need to fix these issues through land regularization.
My opponent, I'm glad that you have mentioned that because you have seen it played right into our hands. Please remember that ZOSO is a phased program that also includes better infrastructure. So yes, it will correct the very issue that you mentioned. Would you not also concede that previous land regularization attempts in places like Rosetown and Steve Garden have been implemented, yet the community is crime-filled?
Definitely not, because as you heard from my quote, where the citizen said there is no more drive for self-upliftment. Additionally, you miss the point that our holistic definition of land regularization would mitigate against those pilots, because we are arguing for a model that has a holistic and comprehensive approach.
Additionally, what we have not seen in Jamaica is a comprehensive result of how these social intervention programs have worked, because there's no matrix to determine effectiveness. Give us 5 years to fix the land issues, and then we'll show you the results. We can prove that in terms of the number of people who get lands and so on.
My opponent, the extensive policy that you have put across for 5 years is just simply an extensive social intervention policy. You are proposing that we put land before people, and we're saying that cannot work.
But moving on, my opponents, wouldn't you agree that the culture of gang violence is deeply embedded in the fabric of these communities, which is why they cannot progress?
We agree with that because as our politics have entrenched these gang and fueled these gang violence, which is why we need to fix the communities. Because when you look at the communities, these are communities that support gang violence through politics. We need to fix the communities by regularizing them, giving them proper infrastructure. And as stated, it is not just about giving people title. It's about giving them proper infrastructure, road, water, safety nets that they will need, infrastructure. We're talking about climate change issues because we build on places that are not sustainable, and we need to address it through land regularization.
My opponent, the same water, infrastructure, and everything that you've mentioned also falls under the ambit of social intervention.
We ask for that.
Thank you, teams, for that period of questioning. We'll now have the converse. So we'll have the proposition team asking questions of the opposition team.
Can you provide a reducing gang violence through social interventions alone? We have given you 5 years.
My opponent, we never said that we would use social intervention alone. 5 years cannot fix corruption, crime problems. Instead, what we said, let's have a myriad of programs. Let's take a holistic approach. Let's implement each over phases. We've shown you the success of the ZOSO. We've shown you the move from 54 murders to 0 murders. Why are you hell-bent on neglecting that?
So you have given us fragmented data.
I think that we're still on our time.
And let us not forget that the programs that we plan to implement or that we have shown you are both short and long term.
Okay. Yes, for almost 20 years we have been on these social interventions. How much more time should we give you? 30 more years? 20 more years?
And 300
while Rome burns?
Thank you, my opponent. My opponent, you seem to be missing the point. What you have cited and what we have conceded to is the fact that there have been poor implementation of the social intervention program. However, my first and second speaker would have adequately said to you that no, we're going to implement oversight. No, we're going to implement monitor and evaluation. Under steps, we are going to do things differently. The problem is not the social intervention programs themselves. The problem is how they are followed up, how they are monitored, how they are evaluation, and we've purported that we will be correcting that. Additionally, my opponent, the correction have already started.
Thank you.
Why should we allow you to continue to waste taxpayers' dollars for years and decades where you have failed to prove to us that social interventions should be prioritized because we have not been seeing those benefits? Give us 5 years and we will show you results through social intervention.
Something novel.
Thank you. My opponent, if anything, you are the one who is purporting to waste taxpayers' money because taxpayers' money has been used to implement land regularization in places like CV Gardens and Rosetown, who came on the news just last week, and Trenchtown. What we've said to you is that taxpayer will have their burden relief from our proposed plan because they are donors, have been donors that have funded these projects because they are created for that specific purpose. We've given you Rise Life Jamaica, we've given you USAID, we've given you the EU that have continuously fund social intervention programs, lessening the monetary burden on taxpayers.
Why would you prioritize social initiatives at this time when, according to the Deputy Prime Minister, approximately $100 billion have been wasted on these initiatives? And many of what you cited are private sector, international organizations. We are talking today about government spending.
My opponent, the Research and International Corporation, is to help drive home the point that we do not shoulder the monetary burden by ourselves, that we have help.
Yes, we do have help, but when you actually the contrast, even if the government may waive some of the fees for land regularization procedures, if residents themselves aren't the ones who are going to bear the cost, then taxpayers will be required too. So I see a greater burden still being placed on the state.
In addition to the greater burden being placed on the state,
Question.
What is your real opposition to empowering communities before applying targeted social interventions?
My opponent, we are never opposed to land regularization. We've conceded that this is important, but what the team opposition is saying is that you cannot put land before people. We are saying social intervention have to come first. They have to target the people first, and then we target land. We are saying that you cannot possibly suggest putting a branch to correct a problem when you have a stem. My opponent, please to also note that land regularization also falls under the ambit of social intervention. So it is unreasonable for you to propose against land regularization. My opponent, the mood says prioritize, and what we're telling you is branch. Branch cannot go before stem.
Thank you.
Wouldn't you concede that in order to treat people's needs, they need somewhere to be, which is why we need to have them in a regularized area? In addition to that, what we have not seen coming from you,
My opponent, these people aren't currently homeless. I don't know if you know or if you've been to communities in St. James that are gang affiliated or plagued by crime. These communities have 2-story houses, 3-story houses. And so we're saying to you that the people aren't homeless, and we are also saying to you that we're not opposing infrastructure modification, but we are saying we first have to target the people, because my opponents, when you go into this community, when you are allowed to go in there and there's no nearby bushes, without targeting the mindset of the people, they are going to run under a nearby bed, and they will be protected, have not been re-socialized, who have not been recultured.
Time, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a right? So we'll take a break for a minute, and then we will pick up the debate with the opposition reply speaker, followed by the proposition reply speaker. And the 1-minute recession begins now. Thank you.
These lands in these areas when the stigma continue to exist. Again, my opponent, let us put people before gangs. The second speaker, have also put forward that when there is security and there is permanence, then residents are inclined to defend their community. But what team opposition has said to you is that familiar bond trumps that, and you will not give a mother a title and she simply carries her son to the police because now she has some sort of security and permanence. Mr. Adjudicator, we would have stepped our way to victory when team opposition put forward the ironclad argument that in addressing the issues of crime, there exists a criminal subculture that perpetuates the problem associated with gang violence. Team opposition said resocialization is vital to uproot the perennial plague of gang violence. Simply handing out title and land tenure does not begin to even put a minor dent in the significant crime monster that we're aiming to dethrone. Team proposition postulates the impracticality of land regularization as a priority right now and the additional burden that it will put on taxpayers. Whereas team opposition, Mr. Adjudicator, told you that with social intervention, majority of our funding has been and will continue to be funded as that spearheads these programs. Along with that, we will also have an opportunity to challenge and reshape the criminal mindset and culture. Mr. Speaker, if you ask me, 2 for 1 is always better in this economy. Team opposition, I like the disingenuous idea being purported by proposition where they claim that land regularization leads to upward social mobility and boom, that will stop crime. We have disabused them of that claim by telling them that there is stigma, there is culture, there is psychological effect. We have said to you that there is corruption. We have laid out a myriad of reasons that crime exists and gang violence that cannot just be stopped by land regularization. Even without the continuation of our second speaker, we would have had the superior case, but we didn't stop there. We did not ease up. team opposition highlighted some of the most successful implemented social intervention mechanism and how they have achieved significant results. We have told you about Zozo. We have told you about turning the number 54 into 0. Never you forget that. The darling of the social intervention program, STARS, the initiative has multifaceted long-term and short-term benefit. We've spoken about education. We've spoken about employment. We've said that when we utilize social employment and entrepreneurship programs to target the current gang violence, we also challenge the culture of the children who would have been predisposed to violence and eventually join gangs. We are slowly but surely eradicating the incubator for gangs. No incubator means no continuation. Mr. Speaker, what we've said is that gang violence is a here and now problem, and social intervention is the only thing tasked with enough multifacety to correct that. So follow me and step up.
Thank you very much, Whip. And let's make way for the final speaker in the debate, the proposition reply speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Speaker, the opposition has the nerve to even mention these fictitious benefits of social intervention on Jamaican youths when for the last 5 years there has been a significant uptick in crime and violence involving youths aged 14 to 24. So much so that 49% of persons arrested for murder in this country are youths in that age group. Not to mention the persistent rise in school dropout rates since 2014, particularly amongst boys in grades 11. These rates are even higher when we disaggregate the data by schools within these underserved communities. Additionally, at a time when overall unemployment in Jamaica is at its lowest, youth unemployment is at its highest, Mr. Speaker. They have also tried, Mr. Speaker, to suggest that the slight decrease in a few communities in St. James is somehow attributable to social interventions. But we have no data, nor do we have official statements to support this claim. In fact, the use of states of emergencies continues to be credited for these reductions, and SOEs are not social interventions, nor are they permanent or sustainable crime-fighting tools. Mr. Speaker, my colleague stated earlier, billions wasted on social interventions in Jamaica in reference to 387 billion allocated to programs targeting the same at-risk youths you talk about. Moreover, the Minister of National Security agreed, and I quote, Jamaica's crime rate could have been far lower if half of this allocation had been channeled elsewhere. We have shown you that crime and gang violence are often associated with underserved communities riddled with poverty and neglect, and that is not a coincidence. Police commissioners, the HAJ, researchers, ministers of national security have all asserted that informal communities pose a significant hindrance to the security forces, and to combat these logistical challenges, regularized housing will be a buffer against crime and gang violence. Mr. Speaker, the opposition has not demonstrated why we should continue to waste hundreds of billions in prioritizing social interventions. What fruits are you talking about? Priority has been given for the past 15 years, and our return on investment is more gangs, more guns, more scamming, more reprisals, and regrettably, more lives lost at the hands of gangsters in this country. Mr. Speaker, even if the land regularization strategy does not curtail gang violence, well, neither have the social interventions opposition, but it will cost us way less to regularize communities. And as my colleagues told you earlier, the benefits include affording residents their own legitimate piece of the rock, thereby providing a viable escape from poverty whilst building generational wealth. Those are your economic benefits. By formalizing land tenure, the implementation of Jamaica Eye will be more effective. Upgrading infrastructure will make it easier for the security forces to navigate these communities. Through this thrust, government can better acquire geographic and demographic demographic data aimed at developing more informed social interventions. Over time, formalizing and updating civic addresses could enhance the employability and the economic prospects for many residents. And finally, it will improve community development and enhance state legitimacy. These will set the platform, Mr. Speaker, for destabilizing gang strongholds and eventually curbing gang violence. And let us make it abundantly clear, we are in no way dismissing social interventions. In fact, as my colleague noted, in order for investment in social interventions to bear the fruit that you speak about, the environment must first be conducive, not after. Providing mentorship and training, conflict resolution and vocational skills only to return these same individuals to the same destitute and deplorable conditions will not result in meaningful or sustainable changes to their mindsets nor their behavior. And that is why, though we will deprioritize social interventions, we will continue the education and entrepreneurship program set up by the Ministry of Labour and Security to complement our focus on land regularization. It will empower individuals to fulfill their financial obligations without them resorting to illicit means in gangs. Closing, Mr. Speaker, we have provided regional examples from Peru and Colombia where, similar to Jamaica, gang violence is prevalent, and regularizing land tenure has been proven to be effective in reducing it. We must choose, Mr. Speaker. One, maintain the status quo, which has not delivered the intended outcomes while costing us almost $500 billion since 2007. Or two, prioritize a new approach in the medium term, and should it not yield immediate results, it will still generate added benefits at a much lower cost.
The whips are firing, ladies and gentlemen. The whip them are leak.
The passion overflowing in this room. We have just witnessed the final debate, the preliminary rounds, and and from this match, we will know who will be the team taking on the Ministry of Justice in the finals on the 7th of August. At this time, all we're left to do is to say thank you, teams, for a very spirited debate. The judges will deliberate, and they will return in about 15 or so minutes. And we will know who will advance to the finals and who will play off for the third place. Thank you, teams, for a very good match. And for those of you online, stay tuned. Full of spirits and
Activate a 7-day Prime Broader plan today and enjoy the action anywhere you're there this summer.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you so much for joining us for the semi-finals, the second semi-finals match in the public sector debate competition. The length of time that we took in determining the winner is only indicative of the close match that we saw and the high quality of debate that we witnessed. And in that regard, I invite you to put your hands together for our debaters. The mote, as presented, asks us to interrogate the utility of one measure over another. On team proposition, they are arguing for land regularization to be pursued over social intervention measures, and opposition is arguing for the converse of that. Opposition is arguing for social intervention measures to be pursued over land regularization. I will start by saying did a decent job of raising sufficient doubt about why the opponent's measure should not be pursued. So on team proposition, we think they did a very good job at expressing to us why there are doubts about social intervention measures. And similarly, on team opposition, they did a very good job of explaining to us why there are significant doubts that underpin land regularization. And the other arguments that they expressed in the debate, such as the cost of each alternative, the time that it will take to achieve success, and they provided sufficient evidence to raise questions about their opponent's alternative. So we have seen where there was a good work done to disprove, to some extent, the utility of the opponent's alternative. So the debate then comes down to which team would have shown or would have done the better job of telling us why their measure ought to be, have expressed that the utility of their measure is to be prioritized. Both teams would have expressed in a kind of subtle way that each measure individually would not achieve success in gang-infested communities. So there is a concession that both measures are necessary for us to achieve success in these gang-infested areas. And that their social interventions on their own might not be sufficient. Land regularization on its own might not be sufficient, but both combined together would be a better approach. So having that acceptance that both alternatives result in a better outcome with respect to resolving the issue of violence in the gang-prone areas, the question that determines the winner in the debate is which measure is to be pursued first. Which measure? Should we have social interventions preceding land regularization, or should we have land regularization preceding social interventions? And you saw that coming out in the debate. So you saw proposition saying we should regularize the land first, create this kind of conducive environment for social interventions, because they contend that social interventions will not work in an environment where police will have to walk and climb and jump over zinc fence where the area is not properly regularized. So they are contending that it is land regularization that ought to be pursued first to create that kind of environment that is welcoming for the social interventions that opposition want. Opposition contends that that ought not to be the case, that land regularization doesn't do a sufficient job of calming the environment, so we should pursue social interventions. And then we should have that sort of supporting mechanism that will result in the continued utility being realized from the social interventions through the land regularization. But the problem the panel had with proposition is that there was not significant explanation as to how land regulation results in trust, which they contend is an important element that will create this kind of conducive environment for the social interventions. So they told us that land regularization will bridge the social divide. And they told us that it will result in a higher level of trust in the government. For the panel, there needed to be a greater degree of explanation as to proving how we move from giving people land titles, offering them stable home setting, and how that will translate to greater trust in government, especially in the face of the criticism from opposition, that you have people in these gang-infested communities that their land is regularized, they have titles, they have well-structured homes, but there is still a significant trust deficit in the government. We didn't think that the proposition team dealt well with the argument of trust. So that undermines the proposition's argument that that land regularization will lead to the creation of this conducive environment. When we match that against what we got from opposition contends that the social intervention mechanisms are necessary to create this kind of calm environment, because what is necessary that comes from this calmer environment is people who can be reasoned with, and you perhaps get a better degree of trust in that kind of stable environment relative to an environment where land regularization is pursued. So ladies and gentlemen, in summation, the panel was convinced that what ought to be pursued as the first measure is social interventions. Right, a commendable job that was not yet finished. A commendable job for team opposition is they modeled their social intervention based on Project STAR and Zozo, which have evidence of success in the status quo. So they contend that we are framing our social intervention mechanism, pulling aspects from these successful social interventions and ignoring the problematic ones that PROP contends, the ones that have program errors in their execution, etc., and implementation. We are leaving those aspects, and we are putting together this well-structured social intervention. We think that that was a commendable effort on the part of team opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, the scores are, and it was very close, but a unanimous decision from the panel. On 299 points, team opposition, the Administrators General Department, they will proceed to the grand final. And going to face teaching services battling for third place is a team from the Ministry of Education and Youth. 297 points, just 2 points behind the winning team. I told you it was a closely fought match. Ladies and gentlemen, the best debater. It is customary, usually is the case, Jermaine and Iki, that the best debater comes from the team that won the debate. It's not the case this time around. The best debater is from the losing team, the team that is proposing, and the best speaker is the proposition reply speaker. And just to share why she is the best speaker, even though she's not from the winning team, is that the panel thought that her strategy and how she presented the argument was what amplified the case for her. Albeit it was a bit late because it didn't respond sufficiently to the deficits that existed in the upper half of the debate. But again, we thought that there was significant impact in how she would have identified the significant contending arguments in the debate and expressed those in her favor. Albeit, Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.